en passant, for you people who play chess while you're driving your car. Kind of an intellectual fender bender, I guess. How much that sound better if you told the police, well, I accidentally, I pulled around too far, making, if you just said it was a matter of en passant. Knowing the police here around Little Rock, they'd probably arrest you for using profanity in public. At any rate, it had to do with this, that growth is universal, problems local. That is, without any doubt, if you ever see anything, that is getting close to one of those ideas. If you see it on your own, not just those words, but Kyroots and I stripped it down about to its useful innards. But that is about one of the ideas that, as they say in the racing game, about covers it. They don't say it in the racing game, but I didn't know where else they said it, so I said that. But it has more to do, shall I leave it there? If you understand that growth, if you were going to accept, just for a theoretical discussion, that, well, hell, all of you should be able to get a feel of it by now, rather than me say that life is growing. I mean, you got to be an absolute, what's the synonym for idiot? Ordinary. You got to be an ordinary person to not see. I mean, you have got to be operating with somewhat less than either one or two senses. You got to have hormones that are going downhill yourself. Not to understand, not to see, no matter how you may personally, ephemerally, in the midst of minor problems and irritations like paper cuts on your lips, to feel like life sucks. You have got to see that life is growing, regardless of the fact I know if you're ordinary, you don't like it. But you're made not to like it because you're incomplete and you can't complete yourself, and therefore the whole feeling is, well, life is not actually going anywhere. And most people feel as though it's going downhill because they know that they are going downhill, you know. All those beautiful places, Forest Lawn, laying next to Mama, eternal rest. So life is wired up. Of course, it's not based upon any kind of psychological or otherwise flaw in people, and it's not that they're idiots. But as all of you know, before you had a life before you got entangled in this pseudo-affair, that everyone knows, even at your best, you can be educated, sophisticated, even sober, off drugs for a long time, and you simply look around and you can be in the midst of being fairly intelligent, sophisticated. You can be teaching school, you can be in school, you can own a school. And still, if you think about, well, what's the nature of life? If I was having to measure life by some kind of symbolic plumb, would I say life is going uphill or downhill? And the feeling has always been, throughout history, everybody is, well, it's not right. You know, and you can shade the degrees all the way from fundamentalist religious ideas that life is really some sort of test, or even worse, that it's a punishment for some past transgression, or if you were just more psychologically inclined, if you're more of a humanist and less religious, the feeling still is, you simply look around, the evidence is there that we're not getting better, and they can start whipping out the what? No, don't say that, because not everybody is an exhibitionist. I was going to say statistics. Because they can prove, anyone can prove that we now have more fill in the blanks. Hungry people than ever. Homeless people. People with bad haircuts. We're mistreating each other more. Just from a humanistic view, everyone knows out there on the street, it's not a joke. You ask people, politicians, religious leaders, anybody, your mama, say, is things better now than they used to be? And of course, if they're old enough that the rock going up the hill is heavier. It is heavier. They don't imagine it's heavier. It is heavier. Your mother, your father are going to say, no, I'm sorry. And then they will list a litany, you know, all the way from, well, music is, you know, forget it. Morals, hairstyle, you all know that. But you also know, if you know anything, even in the horizontal sense, that this is nothing new. It's Homer threw it in some parts of the, I started to say some of the parts you skipped to the Iliad, which I assume was 99% of it. But even he, wringing his hands and moaning. So there is this feeling that life is going downhill because man is not complete. The individual human nervous system is unfinished, is why it can grow. But there's a simultaneous, nothing strange, but once you see it, there is the inescapable at that level, within 3 dimensions. Since you're unfinished, it's also the feeling of being unfinished is operationally synonymous with bad news. It's like itching where you can't scratch. And if you literally went through life itching and where you couldn't scratch, just constantly, and just somebody came up and asked you in the most reasonable manner, how do you like life so far? And if you wanted to get in a deep philosophical discussion, perhaps you could think of things that you've enjoyed in the past. But if they said, just in speaking in toto, and that cop says, I told you not to talk like that here in Arkansas. If you just said, just in general, how do you find life? And if you had been scratching, trying to scratch a place that itch that you couldn't find, like for 20 or 30 years, what's your feeling? Your feeling is, hey, come on. So, you've got that. It is an absolute given. There's nothing wrong, and it is not limited to any particular explanation. Not at the ordinary view. That is, it is not a problem, and even if it were a problem, which ordinary mind says, well, it is a problem. If you feel like life is a problem, then that's a problem. But what I mean is that there is no particular way in which to look at it properly at the ordinary view. Ordinary people do, of course, because you say, all right, if life is a problem, if life is not exactly what it should be, and the whole world goes, right. And you say, well, what would you, to what, or in what area would you attribute this shortcoming? And believe it or not, religious people would come up with probably something in the religious area. And you fill in the rest. But the point is, none of it explains it, because it is not a problem to begin with, and if it were a problem, it's not limited to any one view. It has to do with the very fact that the nervous system is unfinished, and so the feeling that life is going downhill is not subject to any sort of diagnosis of the flower itself. That Kyroot tonight, that the man who strolled through his garden and said, if indeed the, quote, problems of the bloom stem from the soil, what's the purpose in trying to diagnose the flower? But the ordinary mind, that's all it can do. All right, back to another one. You constantly hear it passes for some sort of step up in intelligence is for someone to suddenly counter, carry, rebuff, rejoin by saying, well, what you just pointed out, good man, my good man, no. All you're doing now is trying to attack the symptoms. Again, even Homer's father, in fact, had some stuff to say about that. So it's nothing new, but that would just almost stop intellectual traffic at city level. If somebody says, well, here's a problem we got, vote for me, and I'll take care of the problem. And his opponent says, boy, talk about old hat thinking. Talk about outdated ideas. All you're doing, you want us to try and take money. Here comes a good one. Throw money at it. And all it is the symptoms. We'll never cure it if we're just going to try and treat symptoms. Whatever symptoms they're talking about. Poverty, crime, bad haircuts. I don't know why it keeps popping up in today's political arena, but it does. Well, what are they saying? And that normally, as you should know by now, you can think back to yourself, we're not laughing at anybody else. You would sit right there at ordinary level, and if you were paying any attention to the area, the subject in discussion, you had any interest, you would nod right along. Because, again, it's just a representation of the fact that life, in the secondary sense, is always incomplete, forever. Thank God. And so for anybody to say, well, wait a minute, you're saying, let's do so-and-so, if it's something to do with the economy, or housing, food, political stability in the world. And somebody said, well, we've got this problem, but what we've done heretofore, these old hat thinkers, the conservatives, or if it was vice versa, the liberals being in office, whoever it was, look at what they've done. And they'll name a few things, and they'll say, all that is, they are attempting to treat the symptoms. And that will not do. Any doctor will tell you that if you're going to effect a cure, You have got to get to the cause, not the symptoms. And you'll sit right there, you and every other intelligent person go, Jesus, that is true. But then nobody says, well, wait a minute. Of course, Kyroots did this for you some time ago. Kyroots simply pointed out in his pithy manner, officer, as pithy, P-I-T-H-Y. In his pithy manner, Kyroots pointed out, if you recall, can everybody sing it by now? Everything is symptoms. It's not playing with words. At the secondary level, at the invented, so to speak, compared to the primary, in the intellectual secondary world of man, everything is symptoms, using their terms. And once you see that, then this whole idea of somebody saying, well, wait a minute, I'll tell you why you're not getting anywhere. I'll tell you why we're not getting anywhere. All we keep doing is trying to treat the symptoms rather than get to the root cause. There it is. There's not anything wrong. All of it is symptoms, including the people that say, well, you see, do I have to finish it? All right. Including the people that say, well, our problem is we keep trying to treat the symptoms, and we never get to the root cause, and therefore the symptoms just continue and continue. We don't get anywhere. We don't. Those same people are eating now with impunity. Fish, I didn't memorize it, they're eating fish safely in a healthy manner. There is, what it amounted to was 52 weeks a year times 3,500 years. It was like 15,000, whatever it was, week-old fish. The ordinary mind of ordinary men can do that. Not only do it safely, Kyroots just made it kind of short, but can do it and thrive off of it. Which is what that is. Them saying, well, we never get anywhere. All right, from one view, they're correct. That is on the basis, well, all we do is keep trying to treat symptoms, and we never get to the root causes. And the intellectual people, the avant-garde of city thought at any given time and place will agree. They're supposed to. And you can't disprove it. I mean, they wouldn't even argue with it. Nobody would try to prove it or disprove it. They'd simply say, well, wait a minute. We can't be. And you can make up the examples are anywhere you want to look. They say, we cannot continue to try and lock up people for stealing. Is one of the most common. And then the person will say, but because the reason is, why does somebody steal? Just locking them up's not going to do it, and then somebody else comes along and steals. So we're not getting to the problem. Of course, if we were smart alecks and trying to really make the whole world become anachronistic in sort of a positive sense, that is, throw things out of kilter, we could say, you know, like, is everybody listening to what they're saying? Well, we arrest somebody. It didn't have to be a matter of penology. No, officer, that has to do with crime. Somebody get that guy out of here. They say, well, we can arrest somebody, or they say, well, we can tear down slums over here, or we can get all these people that won't work, and we'll give them a nice place to live. But we're not doing anything because as sure as we arrest this guy, as soon as we feed this guy, as soon as we get this guy straightened out, another one comes right along. And that seems to be, according to that society that wrote us tonight of reasonable thought, that prima facie seems to be proof of what they're saying. That we're not curing anything because all we're doing is fooling around with the symptoms, because as soon as we do this one, as soon as we try and treat this one, this guy, this scene, this scenario, this situation, which is just a symptom, as soon as we do it, by God, and that one's out of the way, and we think, well, we can rest. Here's another one. And you want to go, well, you know. Nobody at all finds this interesting? No. Which they're supposed to. They'd say, I don't find it interesting. I find it to be proof of what I'm saying. Which is true, yeah, it is. But you don't find it interesting? Yeah. Well, a little more if we were just to play our speculative game that we wouldn't do with ordinary intelligence, is you'd have to say, rather than you finding that to be a proof that you're correct, that we're not doing anything proper, how about look at it another way? We're doing things extremely proper, because what it's doing is keeping things alive. And I'm simply saying we're treating the symptoms. There is nothing, at least anybody wants to play with the King's English, it's really that everything is symptoms. Trust me. You figure it out. Back to where we were, or where we tried to start, is that growth is universal and problems local. if you saw, well, let's assume that you did, that you got some of your own personal grasp of what I'm talking about, and that life is simply expanding in all possible directions, that life, if you could see it on some, if you could go outside this universe, outside this reality, and you looked, and let's assume just for the sake of intellectual discussion, that my detailing is right on the money, and that life is expanding in all possible directions, and expansion being growing. Not just historically, not just on this planet, but in every possible way in this universe, in this reality. Now, if that were true, that growth is universal, then everything that man considers to be non-growth, and I just put it, Kyroot and I did, as problems. You call it anything you want to, difficulties, anti-growth, anomalies, warts, sores, temporary setback, an ephemeral halt in the proceedings. Anything that would not be growth from any view in that universe, and the only view that we're really concerned with here are human views, that there stands a human trying his best to be intellectual, perceptive, objective, scientific, and even a human that in some way had tried to adopt the idea, or even had a glimpse of the idea that yes, life is expanding, there's no doubt about it. Things are not generally going downhill. Except for the fact that here's an example. A guy just killed his whole family. Just came home and said, "What's for supper?" And sent it. And after that, they heard him holler, "Meatloaf again!" Then they had heard four shots ring out. All right. From any reasonable view, from anything on a local level, on this planet, from a humanist view, a philosophical view, a Christian view, a Jewish view, a religious view, an atheistic view, a civilized view, let's assume that anybody would say, that ain't right. That is not growth. That is not good. Well, what else can we say? You just can't defend it. There's no way to try and explain that signifies growth. Now back to the opening. Growth is universal. Problems local. It is right there, I could say, I'm about to say, that all manner of city level, all level of ordinary thinking, just under ordinary conditions, from the most mundane, bricklayer, to the most educated philosopher. That is where they get stuck. They're supposed to, but I'm just trying to make you see something. It's not to point out the shortcomings of education or humanity. But they always get stuck there, whether they be religious or not. They can be absolute atheist philosophers. And they still get stuck at what I'm pointing out to you, that growth is universal, problems local. Because then they're stuck with this. If they were religious, of course, in some way, they reflect or they want to debate. Well, my God, if there is some God, if there's some great force, some wisdom in some form, some specific form somewhere outside the system that did this and was wise enough and compassionate enough and all the things that they attribute to God, well, let's don't go into where they got these ideas.
Well, I got them right here in the Bible.
Well, have you ever heard of a merry-go-round, sir? No, I don't have to. I'm a minister. Okay. Have you ever heard of a machine that will feed itself? I told you I'm a rabbi. Well, how about, have you ever heard of a woodpecker with a peg leg? They're faced with them trying, well, I'm sure all of you followed my hand. They're faced with trying to explain. They're not incorrect, but all the religions have these attributes of higher forces, whether they be gods or Superman, compassionate and etc. and all wise, but especially compassionate. Especially, there are no gods, there are no superhumans, there are no great cosmic forces somewhere that's going to shoot their whole family just because they had meatloaf, right? So we got that established. And so everyone dreams of that. Even if they are non-religious, they dream, well, in some way we are becoming more and more human. We're becoming more intelligent, more humane, more compassionate. And so everyone assumes, it is built into the system, that we are coming to an area wherein, or we're aspiring to a place wherein humans would not kill one another, especially over what's for supper. But then they're faced with this. They're faced with the fact that all over the neighborhood, all over the planet, strewn throughout history, are just such instances. And they do not seem to be on the big D, the big decline. And so they're left. Religious people, of course, they're not left with much because they can always get out of it. But even those who don't say they're religious, they're still left with something is wrong. I feel like life is getting better. I feel like that we're becoming more educated, more intelligent. We should be doing better. And I even believe in the theory that life is probably evolving in all areas, not just physically, but I probably believe the axiom, or at least the theorem, that life is evolving for the best. But Jesus, Holy Mother of God, I'm surrounded by people that keep killing each other on an individual level over food. Countries killing each other over, can you believe it, religion? So they can't explain it's the point. And it's not just a rhetorical or religious problem. Is, as always, a nature of energy flowing, and it has nowhere to go. And so they feel as though we're left again with unsatisfied, if not cul-de-sacs here, at least in unsatisfying ways, in the same way they find their life unsatisfying. That life is not really right yet. They feel like, well, things are not right, and they can't explain why. Even if they accept and say, well, I certainly believe, I am 100% behind the idea of not only biological evolution, but psychological, spiritual, cultural, artistic. There is no doubt. And if you say, well, how about that guy? In fact, he lived in your neighborhood that killed his family. Yeah, I know. That, sometimes I sit around and I wonder. Of course, I still feel like life is progressing, but that is, obviously the man was psychotic. He needed help. Well, what does that say? Nowadays, that's all you can do. Or that's probably the latest in the civilized world is, well, he needed help. Back to what I'm pointing out. There's no doubt that there appears to be continually non-growth areas, non-growth instances. The man killed his family. Growth is universal. Problems, local. It is not an excuse, of course, for a man killing his wife, and it is not a justification. At the ordinary level, to ordinary people, it's not even an explanation. You'd be foolish, you'd be as ordinary as they are to try to offer it to ordinary people. But a merry-go-round can be, if we need to say this, a bus. Can be going right along at 60 miles an hour, and that guy in a Kyroots tonight tried to, in a way that I guess gives a whole new definition to either understatement or sarcasm, is that man who tried to rally his fellow passengers by pointing out that even though the bus may be going 60 miles an hour, don't worry, you can get up and walk up and down the aisle a lot slower than that. Kyroots did note that some of the riders seemed to be more comforted by this notion than others. To get too inverted and abstruse again, that is, things on a large level can be going along swimmingly, while on a local level you can be drowningly. But what difference does that make? I mean, the bus is flying at 60 miles an hour, making great time, and you suddenly hear, well, a man, a young man, always makes it better, a young man suddenly stood up and went, and died. Or a man stood up and went, meatloaf? And stabbed the woman next to him. You can say, well, that's horrible. That is horrible. Yeah, but ain't the bus making good time? Did it slow the bus down? Well, no. But you see the folly in trying to do that, because if you told an ordinary person, even if they were, I don't know why, drugged enough to take that as being some kind of viable, useful parable, they'd go, well, what the hell does that mean? That somebody stabs their seatmate on the bus because they hand him another meatloaf sandwich, and then you went, well, yeah, but ain't the bus making good time? What the hell does that mean? Of course, nothing other explains why. Well, to ordinary people, they could hear it. It explains the whole question. The big one they call the question of evil. Abraham couldn't explain it. Confucius, Moses. Hell, I don't even think Bill Moyers could explain it. That great tag team partner, that team of me and Kyroots, just did have her. Yes, there's no doubt that man, in a manner completely, well, largely uncalled for, stabbed his wife because of the meatloaf sandwich. But by God, the bus is making damn good time. There is the explanation of the great question of evil. I'll use their terms. Yes, it was evil for that man to stab his wife. But wait a minute, comma. But ain't the bus making damn good time? And an ordinary mind say, proves nothing. It's probably blasphemous. Worse than that, it's probably insane. And you will not get in our handbook this year. Well, that was the opening line for tonight. What I was going to say was that growth is universal and problems local. So we got that much down. And amongst my souvenirs and notes, I had another, I don't know, I didn't count, 20 or 30 lines at least, to go with that. But we're out of time. So we'll go with that.